My name is Kaylee Mansfield and I'm an interior designer. I have a degree in interior design from WSU Tech and I have experience in both commercial and residential design. So I previously worked for an architecture firm where I worked mostly hospitality. I did Hilton's, Marriott's. I touched a little bit of healthcare and office, but mostly hotels. And I now work for a home builder, a custom home builder over on the west side of Wichita, where if you buy a lot, you get to come see me and we get to design your house together. That being said, the power of color at home, color is obviously very important to interior and to yourself. Color is emotional, color is mental, color is psychological, it's physical, it's cultural, it's social, it's personal. It's all so complicated and it's something that we're all basically familiar with the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But it gets a little bit more complicated than that. So today I wanted to talk briefly about color as a cultural factor, color as a psychological factor, and then color as a personal factor. So if we start first with color in culture, color is generalized across the world. Everybody has the same colors available to them, but they hold different meanings and different ideas per culture. So, for example, red in China represents good luck and happiness, where in Native America it represented fire and power and blood. So these are two obviously different feelings. In China, it's going to be invigorating in a positive way, where in Native America, it's going to be felt with a very powerfully, very deeply in two different ways. Blue in Korea, darker shades of blue represent death, where in Ireland, they represent peace and truth. Yellow in Egypt represents prosperity, mourning, and eternity, where in Mexico, it stands for sun and fire. And then green in Italy symbolizes Catholicism, where in Pakistan, it symbolizes Islam. So right away, you can see that depending on the culture you come from, you're going to interact with color in a different way. If you look on the left side of the screen, you can see a bright, sunshiny, pale yellow on the walls with yellow details both in the table runner and on the walls and that wainscot and the mural painted above it. That is going to be a Mexican-inspired interior. And in Mexico, yellow is sun and fire, so it is very life-giving. So in this space, in the context of Mexican culture, it's going to feel very invigorating. On the right, we have a more traditional Chinese interior or Chinese inspired interior, and you can see red everywhere. It's in your cushions, it's in the plants, it's in the table decor, the side table, the screen printing on the wall. And when somebody from a Chinese culture goes into that space, they're going to feel surrounded by good luck and happiness and good fortune. So color within culture is important to keep in mind, because as we continue, you're going to see that color is personal. So bright red to us may feel a little bit overwhelming, a little bit stark. But if you come from China or you come from a deeply connected Chinese culture, red to you is going to feel inspiring and hopeful. Color in psychology. Color holds both a mental impact and a biological, physical impact when we perceive it. It can be taken in two different ways. There's a negative and a positive connotation to every color that we see, and even its light waves affect our physical body. So, for example, red can give the feeling of courage, passion, and excitement, but also fear, aggression, and embarrassment. And it will physically increase your blood pressure. Blue is going to give a sense of calm and cool and relaxing, but also sadness and depression. You're feeling blue. And it's does genuinely lower your blood pressure. Yellow is a feeling of optimism, vitality, and cheerfulness, but also caution and nervousness and sickness. It's like the yellow light in your traffic light. It tells you to slow down or speed up, depending on who you are, how you like to drive. But it will also speed up your metabolism. And green in general is a feeling of freshness, renewal, and youth, just like when springtime comes around and everything comes back to life and you get to see all of the green popping back up after kind of a dull winter. But it also is envy. You're green with envy, inexperience, and immaturity. Green in general signifies good health and well-being, again, because in nature, when trees and plants and other general natural pieces of our environment are in good health, they're going to be this bright, beautiful shade of green, with the exception of a yellow green signifies to us that something is sick. When the leaves start changing to yellow, you tell that they're dying or going into the winter season. And has anybody actually seen somebody so sick they were green? The only time I've ever seen it was my older sister when we were younger. I dared her to lick one of the salt rocks from the Hutchinson salt mines, and she did do it, and she was physically green. So you can see how even within these colors, even within just green or just red, the different tones that we have there are going to give us a different psychological and physical impact of what we're seeing and what we're experiencing. So when we're talking color in interior, where do we start? It probably seems daunting because there's a million different colors in our world, and everyone perceives them differently, and every culture perceives them differently, and everyone reacts to them physically and mentally and spiritually differently. So where do we start when we're talking about your home? So step one, the very first thing I would do as an interior designer in your home is I would decide your mood. So color affects your mood, so establishing how you want to feel in your space creates a strong foundation to build on. Maybe you want a cozy bedroom, but an invigorating office because you're going to need to work there. So in your bedroom, maybe you go with something calming and cool in a blue, maybe deeper tone room, where in your office, you bring in a little bit of orange, something that is lively, something that is bright, something that gets your blood pressure going and allows you to work. Contrast and saturation also affects how you react to the color in your space. So this is something to consider once you've decided on the mood that you want to have and are getting ideas of how you want to bring color into your space. If you look over on the left screen, the very left top picture, I would describe this as a low contrast space. It's going to be mostly neutrals, lots of light tones. The darkest tone that you see in here, probably the ceiling. You may even take it a step further and say the darkest tone in that room is just the shadow that is being cast from the beams in the room. But in general, it's going to be a low contrast area. Now, somebody might go into that room and say, this is so serene. This is calm. This is a room that I want to spend time in after a long, hard day at work because it makes me feel comfortable. And then somebody else might go into that space and say, this is boring. This is doing nothing for me. I do not feel alive or intrigued by this space at all. Right below it is a room I would consider a high contrast room. In fact, it's so high contrast that it is using reds and greens, which are opposite on the color wheel, which are going to have the highest contrast of two color pairings that you can get. The person who loved that upper room, that lower contrast room, is probably going to sit in that room and say, even if it's well designed, I feel on edge here. I feel like I can't relax here. I feel like I can't take my shoes off in here. Where somebody who in the upper room just thought it just wasn't interesting enough could sit in this room and say, this feels so much better. I feel like this represents me. I feel like this is interesting and intriguing, and it just makes me feel more alive to be in this room. So you can see how the power of not even just color, maybe lack thereof, but also the contrast between the colors, the level of contrast you have in your space, whether it's high contrast or low contrast, is going to be a personal decision for you, but it creates two completely different outcomes. So depending on how you want to feel, how you react to high contrast or low contrast interiors will help you determine when you're decorating your space, how much contrast you want to bring in. Also, saturation of colors makes a big difference. On the right side of the room, the upper and the lower picture, there is no denying that these are both green rooms. But they feel different. When you look at them, you have a different actual physical reaction to both of these rooms. The top room, most people, if we set aside opinion on whether you like this room or you prefer the other room, in general, if we look at these rooms, most people would say that upper room is a little bit more serene, a little bit more calm, where the bottom room is going to be way more energizing. I saw a couple people kind of like pull back from it because it is such a bright, deeply saturated, it's almost a neon green. Where the interior and the upper has, you know, you can kind of see a little bit of a blue undertone. It's not the purest form of true green that you can get. And it just feels more serene. So depending on, again, how you want your house to feel, that can be a dictator of, I know I want a greenhouse. How do I pick a shade of green? If you want it to be more calm, perhaps you go with something that has a little bit more of a gray tone. Maybe it's just taken down a couple of notches. Or if you want it to be bright and poppy and impactful, you go with a more lime green. It's probably unsurprising to you all that I really love that lower lime green. So step one for picking color for your home is going to be decide your mood and then pinpoint what color makes you feel that way. If you are from China, you probably would love the color red in your home because it's good luck, it's prosperity, it's happiness. Where maybe you're from Ireland, and when you see red, it's harsh and it's stark and there's no cultural connection to it. So to you, it just raises your blood pressure and you can't relax. So color is very personal. And when you pick your colors and your color story and the saturation and the amount of contrast, I don't care what your second aunt that comes over once every 5 years thinks about the color that you have in your home. You're the one that's going to be living there. You're the one that's going to be seeing it every single day. And you're the one that's going to be interacting with it consistently. So how it makes you feel is what matters, not these imaginary people in this world. I love the neon green, but I think if I grabbed Julie off the street and brought her in, she's not going to like it. Julie can paint hers that sage green if she wants. So pick how it makes you specifically feel. When we're talking color in interiors, basically any art form, but especially in interiors, color is relative. I call it color relativism. And it is really because in interior design, we don't work with a lot of true colors. We work with more nuanced, variable tones of each color. You don't get a ton of like very true Kelly greens in your interior. You get a lot of the sage greens that we saw. And interiors are full of complex neutrals like wood flooring, tile, countertop, stone, and metal finishes. These are things like when I look at even the wood that's on this stand, I can see 5 different tones of the same neutral. 5 different tones of the same neutral that unless they want to blow the budget, they're stuck with. So when you're looking at the colors in your space, you need to look at these complex neutrals that are already in there. You're going to have lots of variations of tones within a natural granite that you don't necessarily have if you go out and you buy a plain beige throw pillow. Colors interact with each other and they have a symbiotic relationship. If you look at that top picture, you can see that there's a gray square within these two squares that are, one's a neon green and one's a fuchsia. You've probably seen something like this before. But if you haven't, you can see the gray in the center of both of those squares is the exact same color. But when you look at them in the context of inside the neon green and the fuchsia, they look different. It looks darker inside the square that is that neon green, and it looks lighter inside of the fuchsia. The undertone almost looks like it's a little bit different inside of those colors. So when you're picking colors, you have to establish an idea of how they interact with everything else that's going on in your home. And if we think back to those complex neutrals, we're talking the natural material that is in your home, the materials that are fixed in your home, your floor, your countertop, your tile, possibly even your cabinets, because it is very expensive to switch cabinets and it's a pain in the butt to do anything about them. So you're probably going to leave them there. The neutral colors are going to be more impacted by the color you bring in than the other way around. So you can bring that neon in and it'll affect the way that we see that gray color, but you won't necessarily feel like the green is impacted by that gray color. The neutral is the one that is being adjusted within your eye based on all of the colors that are surrounding it. So they all have a symbiotic relationship that you need to make sure that you play around with and see what you could find based on the fixed fixtures that you have in your home. And then light also impacts how we see or perceive color. Whether it's artificial light or natural light, even the direction of the sun and the time of day that you're looking at it is going to affect how you see your colors. So in general, north-facing sun is going to have a little bit of a softer cool tone, where a south-facing sun is going to have a softer warm tone. West-facing sun is going to be very warm almost all day. Then east-facing sun is going to feel warm when the sun rises and cool off dramatically as the day goes on. So when you're dealing with color, you're going to want to look at it in multiple areas of your home at multiple different times of the day. When you're picking fixed fixtures, or let's talk about paint, if you're picking a paint color, best practice is going to be to bring samples home with you before you make any decisions, or maybe paint a little swatch on your wall and put it in multiple areas and look at it in the morning and the afternoon and at night and see how they react to the natural light. You can say the same about artificial lighting. I'm sure everybody here has bought a pack of light bulbs before, and then you got them home and you switched out the light bulb in your lamp or your overhead light, and it is a completely different color than every other light bulb that's in your house. But those colors are going to impact the way that you see your paint or your decor or your fixed fixtures. You can have a really bright white paint light source that is going to be a little bit more on the cool side, versus warmer light is going to cast a warm tone across everything. So when it comes to the color relativism we were talking about, warm light on a warm color is going to emphasize how warm it is, but it's going to feel cohesive. But if you have something that is starkly cold, and then you put the candlelight light that you can see that's on the very far left, the warmest light you can get, on something that is ice cold, you're gonna feel disjointed from it because the tones of these things are just too different. So color is relative to each other and to the light in interiors. Building your palette. Building your palette can be fun and it can be complicated and it can require quite a bit of trial and error. So the first thing that you want to look at is you're going to determine the mass tone and the undertone of your fixed finishes. So your fixed finishes being, again, the things that you can't change within your house without a big budget and a lot of time. Your countertops, your cabinets, your flooring, your carpet, things that are installed, and if you want to change it, a subcontractor needs to come in and do it for you. Mass tone versus undertone. You've probably heard of undertone before. You've probably looked at something and said, that has a little bit of a peach undertone. This one has a little bit of a gray undertone. Well, the mass tone is going to be the color that is being impacted by the undertone. So if you have a pure yellow, that's your color. And then if you add a little bit of red under there, you're going to get a yellow mass tone with a slightly red undertone. So the mass tone is going to be in your color, the majority tone, and the undertone is going to be the color that slightly impacts the way that we see that mass tone color. And when you're building your palette, inspirations all around you, fashion, nature, history, architecture, cinema, etc. If you look at your home the way it is right now, and you have a lot of creams, you have a lot of browns, and you have a lot of green tones, then maybe you go outside and you see a beautiful landscape piece of art of a forest, and that can be your inspiration and help you pull a couple of other colors or see how you want to arrange things. If we're assuming that you have no place to start, which is fine, you just don't know where to start, you don't know where to go, you don't really know what you like or what you don't like, you're just right at the very, very beginning, look inside your closet. The colors that you wear all the time are going to be the colors you feel comfortable wearing. So myself, today I'm wearing bright red and orange and yellow and blue and white, and it's crazy colors, and I feel comfortable in those. But if somebody loves a pair of beautiful khaki trousers with a lightweight, breezy linen button-up, then maybe your interior is going to look a little bit more natural than mine. You might have a lot of taupes and beige and creams and browns, and maybe your accent is going to be something that's black that stays within a neutral, where it's probably unsurprising to hear that my living room has neon green and bright yellow and orange and teal, and it's all mixed up in there, but it's because that's what I feel comfortable in. So if you need a starting point, if you look in your closet, you're going to find out what colors make you feel comfortable. You can also look at history if you like Renaissance paintings, or if you love Andy Warhol, those can give you inspiration for building your color palette. Same with architecture, same with cinema. Anywhere you look, if you see something and it gives you a positive impact mentally, spiritually, physically, if you see something you just go, well, that, I just love that. This feels like me. What a great place to get your inspiration for building your color palette. Building your color palette, the simplest rule that you can think of when you're starting from scratch is going to be the 60-30-10 rule. And this is just going to give you a well-proportioned color palette. So the 60 is 60% of your space is going to be this dominant color, with 30% as a secondary color and 10% as an accent color. You can see in this picture, I would say the 60% is kind of these light neutral tones. You can see them in the fluted tile, and you can see it in the countertop and these fabric swatches and the leather swatch up above. I would even pull in that natural wood floor as part of this light toned neutral, because it's kind of a complex neutral. That is the 60 within this color palette. The 30% is going to be that really pretty rosy pink color. You can see it, I believe that's a wall treatment. And then you also have this pink paint color and a little bit of a pink blue boucle fabric that is above. That is the 30% here. And then the 10% is that beautiful, rich red color here. So you can see when you look at this, this seems cohesive, but it also seems interesting. It doesn't seem too blah. because they've done the 60-30-10 rule. The second rule to think of is going to be the 80-20 rule, which is balances the mix of warm and cool tones. The biggest thing that gives you impact and interest in your interior is going to be contrast. It's going to be things that butt up together and they coordinate, but they definitely don't match. So you want this contrast. So you want to decide if you prefer warm tones or if you prefer cool tones. And which one you prefer, you're going to do 80% in that. And then with 20% having a little bit of the cool tones, if you like the warm tones, or 20% is the warm tones if you like the cool tones. But that just gives you a good, interesting mix of warm and cool tones, which makes your space feel a little bit less sterile. Even when I'm looking over here, some of the pale neutrals have a slightly, I would say, like the lower right fabric swatch under the right lighting can leave just a tiny bit gray. And then in the countertop, you can see there's a little bit of gray movement in the base and gray veining on top of the creamy base that pulls in a little bit of cool tones to contrast the beautiful warm tones that we have going on. It's a great way to balance and bring in interest into your space. Now, once you have your color palette and you're putting it into practice, a way to make it interesting is to repeat each color in multiple points of the room at various eye levels. So maybe you have a rug that has the pink rosy tone. And then hip height over on a side table, maybe you put a vase that has the rosy tone. And then maybe higher up at eye level, or maybe even slightly higher, you have a piece of artwork that has the rosy tone. What that does is it lets the eye travel across the space and find familiarity anywhere that you look, and it makes it cohesive. When it comes to variants of the same color, we're talking about, let's say your primary color for your 30% of your 60-30-10 rule is blue. And that's the color that you want to put in there. Maybe you also bring a little bit of navy and you bring in a little bit of turquoise, but they're still under the blue umbrella. That just gives it a little bit more interest, a little bit more variation. The key to a great interior is interest. So having each color at various eye levels in the room with different variations within the same color umbrella is going to give you a more interesting interior. And then one last thing to consider when you're building your color palette is going to be earthy tones versus clear tones. So earthy tones are going to be like what we see here. Everything has just like a little bit of a tint. You get a forest green or an eggplant purple or a beautiful burgundy or a navy blue. These are all going to be considered earthy tones, where something like a bright red or a tangerine orange or chartreuse green are going to be considered clear colors. In general, a good rule of thumb is that those two things do not blend very well. The earth tones and the clear tones don't blend super well. So if you have kind of a coastal themed bathroom and you have these bright sky blues and these ocean foamy white tones, you might not pull in something that's kind of a goldeny mustardy color that's earthy to go with the bright clear tones of the pale blue. And the other way around, where if you have something that's very forest green, it might feel a little bit disjointed if you put in traffic cone orange in a clear tone within your earthy tone colors there. And then the most fun part, I would say, is we've just established all of these rules about balance in color, balance in tone, things to use together, things to not use together, where to put them, where to not put them. And once you know what to do, once you know all of the rules, now it's time to break them. Like I've said throughout this whole presentation, the key to a great interior is interest. And sometimes to be interesting, you gotta break the rules a little bit. So let's say we talked about the 60-30-10 color rule. Well, what if I want to decorate with more than 3 colors? Absolutely, you can. Just pop in all of those colors that you want in increments of like a 5 or 10% within that space. And now you can have a color palette that is a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more different than the standard level 1, 60-30-10. I know I just told you to not mix the earthy colors and the clear colors, but let's think about what if you did have that beautiful earthy tones, and then maybe I just told you not to do this, but what if you did put that traffic cone orange in there? How interesting would that be? Build a color palette with a non-traditional mood. How many people have had a blue bathroom before? One person. But how many people have been into a bathroom that was blue? Most people. What if you made your bathroom red? No one's except I saw some grimaces. I'm just saying. You know, people expect if you walk into a blue bathroom, even if it's not interesting, even if it does nothing for you, you're gonna feel like, well, yeah, this is a bathroom. Of course it's blue. But if you walked into a bathroom and it was bright red, you are never going to forget that bathroom. And your guests are never going to forget that bathroom either. So build a color palette that is non-traditional to how we typically perceive and interact with the space that we're in. The key to breaking these rules is to do something quote unquote wrong, but make it purposeful. Don't do something wrong for the sake of interest and then kind of have it tucked in the back and you're kind of hiding it because you're a little bit nervous about breaking these design rules and you don't know if this is a risk that's going to take. Just go for it. Do something unexpected. Maybe you have this mid-century modern living area where you have like the oranges and the greens and the Sputnik lights and the boomerang details. And then the most prominent piece of art that you have in that room is a Renaissance painting in a thick, gaudy gold frame. When people see that, they're going to say, oh, I didn't expect that. But you did it so purposefully that it's going to be interesting. It's not going to feel as disjointed as if you kind of tried to tuck it away and you wanted to hide it a little bit. So when you break the rules, when you do something quote unquote wrong, do it on purpose. Go full steam ahead with that. And it's just going to make it more interesting. Yes. So we just talked about all of this in theory. What do we do if you want to go home today and spend 30 minutes and adjust the color palette in your home? From where you are, where can we go? Step 1, pick your mood. Pick your mood based on how you want to feel and maybe everything else that you already have in your house. And then note your fixed finishes, the things that you can't change without the subcontractor. Those are the things you're going to have to base everything off of. This is your foundation because you're not changing it. I want to be able to send you home and you can experiment and you can spend $0 to $100. It's not thousands, it's not tens of thousands. What can we do today with a run to Target? Note your fixed finishes, and that's what you're going to be working with. Consider what your must-haves are and what you're willing to be flexible with. I'm not talking your must-haves being your fixed finishes because we are disregarding those at this point when we're cycling through everything that we want to get rid of or emphasize because those are staying there. When you go into your living room, look at what do you have to have there because you love it or because it's important to you or because you have to have it there to use the space. Maybe you have a dining hutch that has been passed down from your family forever. But then you also have a lamp in there because you need to have it there in order to read. Consider what are the things that you have to have and what you're willing to be flexible with. Maybe you have a vase with flowers or a plant or something in there and you're thinking, "No, I just kind of put it there because I wanted to fill the space. I don't necessarily need it here. I don't necessarily like it. It's not necessarily important to me. I just wanted to fill in the space a little bit at some point in life." Consider those things. Now, when you look at what you have, when you consider your fixed finishes and the things that you absolutely have to have for whatever reason, block out all of the rest of the noise. Is the color palette emerging? If you do all of that and you kind of clean up the tidy and you have like the greens and the natural creams and the whites and the browns, like in this picture, great. There's your color palette. It's already shown itself. Lean into that. But if you start picking through what has to stay there and what you want to have in there because you need it to use it, or you want to have it because you just love it so much and a color palette is not showing up, then this is what I would do. I would pick a base neutral from your fixed fixtures, from your flooring, from your countertop stone, from your tile. And I would pick that base neutral and I would make that your 60%. If that means going to the store and buying just a gallon of paint, then you pick that base neutral. And if you paint all of your walls and your trim, and if you want to get crazy or you have somebody that's willing to paint the ceiling for you, go ahead and do that. We're just going to start by pulling out a base neutral from your fixed finishes to create the 60%. Because after you have that 60%, you can build off of it. I would then pick a color from your must-haves that you love and make that your 30%. Maybe your couch is green. Lean into that and make it your 30%. The big bonus about green, you can do this with different knickknacks for any other color, but a big bonus of green is that the house plants you have in your house do count as being added into your color palette. So let's say that you love your green couch, that's going to become your 30. So then you put in artwork that has green, and you put in a vase that has green, and you put in some books in your bookshelf that have green spines, and you just bring it in that way. And then for your 10%, I would pick a color that is either the missing light, mid, or dark tone, and I would make that your 10%. So something I haven't quite touched on up until this point is that when you're building your color palette and when you're balancing these things, we've talked about contrast and we've talked about saturation and we've talked about proportioning all of your colors. But something we haven't talked about is that there's light tones, mid tones, and dark tones of colors. And having all three of those give a really interesting space. So if you're looking at your 60 and your 30, and maybe you have a really light neutral color is your 60, and then your 30% is a green color, like in this picture. You have your light tone, you have your mid tone in the green, you're missing your dark tone. So I would make your 10 a deep, rich brown or a deep, rich black, something that is a dark tone to contrast the light and mid that you already have. That's exactly what was done in this picture. You can see they have dark brown in the picture frame, and they have dark brown in some of the vases, and they just have it scattered kind of throughout each eyesight up there. So that's how I would tackle if you have a color palette and it's not quite emerging. Now, if this is something that you want to do, you want to go home and you want to play around with this, creating a color palette doesn't necessarily have to be you're adding things. You're not going and buying and buying and buying and filling up your space with a bunch of stuff. It could be you're taking away what doesn't tie into the room. Maybe you have a stack of books that just isn't the right tone. It doesn't necessarily need to be in there, but it's also not the right tone. So just take them out of the room and put them in your bedroom or put it in your closet or put it inside of a console where you can close the door. To create a cohesive color palette, you don't have to add. It could be you're taking away. And then the last thing I would do if you went home today, is I would add a singular pop of something unexpected. Maybe you get a beautiful bouquet of flowers that does not tie into the color palette that you have, but you were able to spend $7 at Dylan's to get a bouquet of flowers. It just will make it more interesting. That's what I've got for you today with the presentation. Does anybody have any comments or questions or concerns, or just anything to say, anything to add?
I have a question about the 80-20 rule,
Mm-hmm.
warm versus clear, no,
Cool.
cool, okay, and earthy versus clear, okay, warm versus cool. What happens if you have 100% earthy or 100% cool? What is the effect if you don't mix at all?
So you're saying if you look in your room and you have 100% warm tones, you don't have any cool tones,
Right.
then how I would tackle that, because the point of the 80-20 is to provide interest. It's a good practicing rule. But if you get in there and you have 100% warm tones, then maybe the interest comes in, you have very deep, dark, like maybe a little chunk of black in there, contrasting with a really light, creamy white color. So you bring in the interest by bringing in a little bit more contrast. If you don't necessarily have the mix of warm and cool, you just get that interest from somewhere else. Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes, you know, people say this is the color,
Mm-hmm.
the fad.
Mm-hmm.
So you really should go with what makes you, instead of trying to be up to date.
I would, because trends are very cyclical. For example, I would say if you're living in a house right now that was most recently renovated in the 90s and you're thinking of re-renovating it, if you want to stay trendy, don't touch it. You've officially waited long enough that it all circled back around and you have a cool house. So that being said, is everything's going to go in and out and in and out. I would really encourage you to go with what makes you feel at home and what makes you feel comfortable. And that comes with personal opinion, that comes with personal life experiences and the way that you see things. Maybe you feel a nostalgic connection to the, the yellow oak cabinets that are in your house and you just love them because it just reminds you of when you were raising a family or something and you love it. And everyone's telling you, no, 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 we need to do white cabinets. They don't live there.
Yeah, or gray.
Or, the gray, the subway tile. Yep. So there are trends that are gonna come in and out. And if you like having fun with trends, which it can be fun to experiment with trends, I would do those in things that are not necessarily your fixed fixtures. I wouldn't swap out your cabinets because the newest thing is to have bright white star cabinets, unless you love it that much. If you want to experiment with trends, that's no problem. I would pull it into your art, your blankets, your throw pillows, your decor.
I have a question and a comment, and also I wanted to mention those of you watching on Zoom and Facebook, feel free to type a question, and I'm monitoring those, and I can feed those into our discussion here. The comment was just, I was thinking back to when our director Carrie, before this library was built, she brought in like the swatches and the tiles for this library, and I think everybody really liked it. We were also like, whoa, this is really strong, bold colors and choices.
Mm-hmm.
But then, we thought about it, it's like, well, obviously it's like a different purpose than home because, we want it to be a space that's sort of energizing. So like we've got this deep purple and then there's green and we've got these iridescent windows and stuff, and it all adds, like you said, interest and energy to the space. So that made me think about that in a little different way. And then the question I had was, I think many of us probably have watched HGTV or similar shows at some point, and I was wondering what you think of all that. Maybe like what those shows kind of show accurately, get right, or maybe what is actually a little bit different if you're just out in the marketplace working on your own home or considering buying a home compared to how they show it on TV.
I would say when I watch HGTV, the thing that most stands out to me as being not accurate to real life is the price point. I watch these shows and I can't imagine how they were able to get it done for the amount of money they wanted to spend. So I think that there's gotta be some kind of workout with HGTV in itself that they kind of cover maybe the labor costs or not necessarily the material costs. But something I would say is accurate is like if you watch a Joanna Gaines on Fixer Upper, is that what it's called?
Chip and Joanna.
Yeah, Chip and Joanna Gaines. When you watch their show, and they started a long time ago, but when you watch it, it is not only very timely, like she impacted so many trends and so many homes across the United States, and that is a real impact that that channel, that show, that specific designer had on our culture. So that I would say is really valid. And when these people, they are professional designers, they are professional craftsmen and workmen at this point in HGTV. They do a really great job at designing for the home and for the person that's living in them. They take their time to talk to the people that are gonna be living in there and getting their opinion, and they have experience renovating homes. So they've done trial and error, which is how you get to be a great designer or a great home builder is you trial and error. So I would say that is shockingly accurate. I think it seems because it's on TV, it seems really fake, but when I watch it, I can see the genuine connection between like a Joanna Gaines and the client and the home and that trio that all needs to work together to create a space that we then get to watch on TV.
And I have, oh, yes, Kathy?
Oh, I had a question about color. Sometimes when you work with a designer, somehow they have access to colors you might not have considered if you went to the ACE and looked at the swatches. And refining your sense of, oh yeah, that's fine, and oh, you know, that's great, is, I think that's really hard. And you can get any tint you want, basically, if you can define the tint that you want. But I mean, can we, you know, for paint colors, can we get that tint? Or are they only available to, you know, certain shades only available to designers?
Oh yeah, you can get them. So most paint, you know, if you go to Home Depot, you're probably gonna get a limited selection of Sherwin-Williams. I wish I had brought it with me today, but I work off of a full Sherwin-Williams fan deck that has hundreds of paint colors in it. So you can absolutely access all of those paint colors.
We have Sherwin-Williams and Newton.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite paint brand to work with. And even if you go into the store, their service people are very knowledgeable on getting the color that you want if you just kind of talk to them about it. One trick that I would say professionals are aware of that not necessarily the general public is aware of is that you can get certain paint colors, certain tones at like a 50% or a 75%. And pretty much what they would do is at Sherwin-Williams say that you wanted to get there's a paint color called Navel, which is a really beautiful, it would look pretty similar to the chairs that we have here. You want that exact tone with that exact percentage of your mass tone and exact percentage of that specific undertone, but you don't want it to be that rich. You can get it at a 50%. And pretty much all that does is they just add like white in and mix it up like that. So that's kind of the you can absolutely get all of the colors professionals can get, but that I would say is the one trick of the trade that maybe the general public isn't familiar with that you can access. And Sherwin-Williams would gladly get you little samples so you can see how that differs.
I have two questions. So I like a lot of colors, but sometimes I don't need all those colors, but also I like a lot of different decor. Like I really enjoy the Chinese the Asian decor, but red is not my color.
Mhm.
How do you deal with stuff like that?
Maybe where you like, we talked about the 60-30-10, and that's 3 colors, but you're saying that you like full, vibrant, like a mass amount of colors. I'm the same way. So what I would do at that point is anything that you like to do that is maybe different than the established rules we talked about is I would just make it really purposeful. I would make sure if you have 6 different colors that you want to use in your space, then make sure that maybe there's a touch of it in your rug. And then you have a throw pillow that's at your waist height. And then there's a touch of it in a painting. But make sure that every color is in your space more than just one time. If it's in there one time, you can use it as an accent, but that is really only impactful if you have a limited color palette. If you have a vast color palette, I would just make sure every color that you have is in your space multiple times at different levels of your room.
I also have another question. So if you go to North Newton and you see a bright yellow house, that's mine. So
Oh, beautiful.
how much should I bring that color in? I mean, I love yellow and I love my house. It's got brick on the bottom, so the accent is like a coral brick color.
Uh-huh.
How much should that come in?
So that's really gonna, I would say that that's more of a personal preference thing, and here's why. I would say any time that there is a closed doorway before you walk in, that gives you a blank slate to do anything. If it's maybe you're inside and you have a drywall opening between your living room and your kitchen, it might be pertinent to keep that cohesion throughout. But going from your bedroom to a bathroom where there's a closed door, it gives you the opportunity to start everything all over again. And same thing with the exterior of your house. You don't necessarily have to bring the colors from the exterior of your house inside because there's a doorway that's giving you a blank slate mentally when you walk through the door and close it behind you. You're in a brand new space. But you can if you want to. If you love yellow and your house is outside of your house is yellow and you just want to bring it inside, it'll be really impactful because you're going to say, oh, so it's genuinely carried throughout my entire home, including the outside. So that's really more of a personal preference.
I had just seen some show where they really brought the color that was the outside into the inside, and it seemed to be a big deal for them. But yeah.
So to them, it was important, which is great. But if it's not that important to you, as long as there is a closed doorway, that gives you the opportunity to either do the same or do different.
Do you have any recommendations for when you're in an apartment that your obviously your walls in that situation are fixed finish, and especially when your walls and your trim and your cabinets don't go together?
Oh, great. We love that.
Do you have any recommendations for that?
If your walls and your trim and your floor, all of your fixed finishes don't necessarily go together, I would pick the things that you like, or even the thing that is the most prominent that you can't get away from, and make that the emphasis and de-emphasize the other pieces that you don't necessarily love. I would pull in the colors from the preferred undertone and mass tone that you have that you can't change. And then I would just try to not bring too much attention to the other colors. It's really about pulling forward what you want to pull forward and pushing back what you don't want to have on display. And I know exactly how you feel because I live in a rental and I couldn't touch anything. I could hang art on the wall and that's about all I could do. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
I have another question. So my house, we have a lot of books. There's one or more bookcases in practically every room in the house. And the books are, they're all different colors.
Yeah.
But, in the library, we have the same issue actually. But, so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about, and I mean, I don't wanna, I've seen like on the internet, people decorate by like turning all the books backwards, so you just see the text block and then it's all one color, but I don't wanna do that because then you can't tell what the books are. So, I mean, I guess when you have a masses of books like that, does that kind of function as its own sort of complex neutral in a way, or?
I would say yes, actually, that is a very astute observation, because what I would say, because I've seen what you were talking about, where they turn their books around and it's all neutral, and then it's like, so I just don't get to read my books, I have to take everything off the shelf if I wanna find what I wanna read. I consider something like a very full, lively bookshelf, the same way that I see a stainless steel fridge or your stainless steel dishwasher or your oven. These are things that people expect are going to be the way they are. When someone sees a bookshelf, they expect it to not have a cohesive color palette, and that's fine. When someone sees a refrigerator, they expect it to be stainless steel or they expect it to be white. And so it doesn't really jar the senses that much, because it's really more functional and people expect it to be that way. So I would say, yes, it becomes a complex neutral.
Something that I did, cause at one point I needed a little calmer in my house. Cause I have a bookshelf, so I just took some tension rods and some black fabric. And I made little curtains in front of it, so.
That's perfect. And you can do that same trick to like hide your dishwasher. If you really don't want to see it and it's important to you, you can create a little curtain to hide anything that you want. So that is such a fun, creative way to solve that problem.
I work at an elementary school and we often do that, like in certain places where like we don't want the kids trying to get into these books, so we'll do like
Right.
Velcro on the piece of fabric and then Velcro on the shelf and then cover it with a curtain, because then it's like out of sight, out of mind. And it also creates especially in our special ed room, it creates a calmer environment when you don't have as much visually overstimulating.
And it's not tempting to go in and
Yes,
touch and
exactly.
grab and pull.
Exactly.
Yeah, good.
And speaking of books, sometimes like on HGTV or Joanna, they
Mhm.
they stack them and then put a pot with greenery, so they use them as decor.
As decor.
Yeah.
It's all, if you're gonna do something, you do it purposefully, then people aren't going to question it. So that's a great way to use your funds.
Talking about HGTV, from trading spaces, I don't think it's on the air anymore,
Oh,
but I always enjoy the ones where they trade spaces and then when they trade back, one of the people just hates it so much, whatever was done.
Oh, no, yeah, I know what you're talking
Like, one was a barnyard theme and yeah, because you expect to just be polite about whatever your neighbor did for your house, but this one was just like, I hate this, I can't live here anymore. But anyway, that's kind of off topic, I guess, because nobody goes for that fact, right? But maybe here's a question, like, what's like the most unusual like choice that you've seen that actually worked, or just giving examples like that,
Most unusual choice I've seen that worked. Let me think. I saw, and it really, when someone described it to me, I was skeptical, and when I actually saw it, it was beautiful. It was a home that was really, I would describe it as contemporary. Lots of clean, sleek, modern lines and simplified furniture pieces and just very modern, something that you would see in like a Kim Kardashian's house or something. Very contemporary, very almost expensive looking. And then their cabinets, their designer used a knotty alder, which if you're not familiar, it's alder wood where they kept like the knots inside of them, and they can get very rustic. Some of them look like they're just divots inside of the cabinet door, and some of them are just tiny little spots. So something that you would not expect in a really contemporary house. And when I saw it, I just thought it was so beautiful and so well done. And I genuinely I was like, I would never in a million years have thought to done that. And it looks so good. So that's probably the most unexpected thing that I've ever seen that really worked.
when you're talking about contemporary, when I see that on TV, I wouldn't dare wanna sit there. It's like it's a
Mhm.
showcase. It's
Mhm.
like, don't mess it up, don't.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like if you're getting fingerprints everywhere and you can't touch anything and there's dirt and all.
Yeah.
I know, but it's so personal. It's such personal preference. Like
They feel comfortable.
they love it, and you're like, if you like it, I love it.
What they do when they have kids.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Is all of the kid toys contrasting with their like stark white, very clean interior?
And I just love it when they do the bathroom remodel and I think, well, don't use it. Don't. Where it's so beautiful,
Uh-huh.
pristine, and then it's like.
Yep. I had a client recently who they're doing this beautiful kitchen towers on top of their countertop and then pulling it into a similar look in their master bathroom. And they loved the look of, they saw a picture online where the cabinets had clear glass
Oh, yeah.
and it looked stunning in the pictures. And I kept saying like, and they were like, what do you think about that? I said, it looks beautiful, but you know, when you have the clear glass, it has to look nice. It has to be staged or you're not gonna, and they just kind of, you know, not to their discredit, but they just kind of were like, it just looks so beautiful. It just looks so beautiful. And they were going back and forth about how great it looks. It was a husband and wife and they were deliberating about it. And I stopped the meeting and I said, okay, between the two of you, decide right now whose job it is to keep all of that stuff safe. And they looked at each other and they looked back at me and they said, well, let's just do frosted glass. Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have some examples of your own design?
I was wondering that.
Oh no, I didn't bring, how silly. I didn't bring any with me. I wish I had, but I work at my home building company is called Perfection Builders in Wichita, and on their website they have like a full gallery of stuff, and then on their Instagram they'll have that as well. I can't believe I didn't think to bring my own work in here. Goodness.
I have a question from our Zoom participant Jenny. She asked, what do you do when you have early 1980s orange oak cabinets? How do I work with them? I like warm shades, but the orangey cabinets take over.
That's a good question.
Working with them because you don't want to change them. I would say there's two different directions that you can go. One direction is you can go into the high contrast and look at the color wheel on orange and go to the opposite, which is going to be blue. You can bring in the navies and you can bring in various tones of blue, and it'll be a high contrast area, but it'll still look cohesive because on the color wheel, when you look at them, they're opposite from each other. The other direction that you can go is you can do something that is more, I guess more neutral. If you pull in some of the warmer light colors, warmer creams, and then it just kind of ties in together with that. And it's not as high contrast, it becomes more low contrast. And then if you really want to work with them, but you're willing to spend a little bit of money, the thing that I would do for your cabinets, if we're talking orange cabinets, is that what the question
She
was?
said orange oak, but
Orange oak.
orange color cabinets, yeah.
I'm assuming if you have orange oak cabinets, I would switch out your hardware, because that's something that can be relatively affordable. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it can be expensive or it can be really affordable. If you switch out your hardware into being something that is, I think, honestly, I think brass looks really pretty with it because we're still working in the same warm area, but make your hardware like a piece of jewelry, like when you put earrings on and now your bad haircut doesn't look as bad. That's what I would do, is I would either lean into high contrast or make it very low contrast, and then I would emphasize the little things that you can change.